Emma Mijas died a horrible and painful death unnecessarily on her very first Christmas Eve 2004 at the hands of 25 doctors and nurses, another victim of medical malpractice. All 25 doctors and nurses systematically administered the wrong drugs for her life-threatening condition called SLOS. SLOS, Smith-Lemli-Optis syndrome, is a congenital abnormality which requires treatment strategies on supplying supplemental cholesterol. They gave Emma the wrong drug, Questran, not once, but 92 times. Yes, 92 times in 1 month. A cholesterol-reducing drug, not the cholesterol supplemental drug she needed. All of them knew better. They were trained to know better. They were some of the world's leading authorities at the Louisiana State University Health Science Center in New Orleans. But they just didn't give a damn about Emma's life. In 2013, the prestigious Journal of Patient Safety published a study that as many as 440,000 patients die each year from preventable medical errors. That would make medical errors the third leading cause of death in America, behind heart disease and cancer, which is second. These people are not dying from the illnesses that caused them to seek hospital care in the first place. No, they are dying from mistakes that hospitals could have prevented. What are these fatal errors? Who are these incompetent and negligent doctors? A New England Journal of Medicine, January 28, 2016 study reported that 1% of physicians accounted for 32% of paid malpractice claims over the last 10 years. The ugly truth is that little is being done to hold these dangerous doctors accountable. Researchers found that bad doctors showed distinctive characteristics, including having paid previous malpractice claims. So it stands to reason that healthcare providers could eliminate 1/3 of medical malpractice along with patients' pain and suffering, as well as the added cost of corrective surgeries, long-term care, and indemnity payments by removing the worst 1% of doctors. Why aren't bad doctors stopped from practicing? The answer lies, at least partially, in the National Practitioner Data Bank, a clearinghouse for information on medical malpractice that Congress established in 1986 to help state licensing boards police the healthcare industry. The national database was supposed to help states identify dangerous doctors and prevent them from harming more patients, and is used by hospitals, insurers, and licensing boards to track doctors' records, check prospective hires, and make other decisions. But it is virtually useless in holding doctors accountable because, by federal law, none are listed by name. They are assigned a random number to protect their identities. Even if doctors were identified in the data as they should be, the public would still be barred by law from accessing the records. So vulnerable, sick patients sit in the waiting rooms of bad physicians without a clue about their poor record of performance. And in many cases, a negligent doctor's insurance company pays the victim of malpractice and the doctor goes back to work. If a doctor develops a bad enough reputation in one town, he can move to a new state and continue practicing. This is unbelievable. But today, the public does not have access to the database to identify doctors' names and addresses, to identify doctors with uniquely long histories of being sued or disciplined for medical malpractice. Because on September 1st, 2011, the government cut off public access. What was behind that decision? Apparently, one Kansas doctor with a trail of malpractice suits, Dr. Robert Tenney. The Kansas-based doctor complained to the Government Health Resources and Service Administration that the Kansas City Star newspaper was publishing the story of one of his patients, Mary Beth Chase, who died in 2007 after undergoing a brain surgery with Dr. Tenney. It is also noted that Tenney has been sued at least 16 times for medical malpractice, but had never been disciplined by the state's licensing boards. The Insider Exclusive produced a TV story on this case with the lawyers who represented Mary Beth's family when doctors go bad, Mary Beth Chase versus Dr. Robert T. Tenney. Tenney finally settled the Chase family's wrongful death suit for $1 million. The settlement brought total malpractice payments paid on Tenney's behalf since the early 1990s to roughly $3.7 million. In some states, including California, Colorado, Georgia, and New York, patients can go to medical boards' websites to find out about doctors' malpractice histories, but not in Kansas and Missouri. Why don't doctors report on bad doctors? Physicians often see the mistakes made by their peers, which puts them in a sticky ethical situation. Should they tell the patient about a mistake made by a different doctor? Too often they don't. Why not? One reason is that doctors depend on each other for business. So a physician who breaks the code of silence may become known as an informer or snitch and lose referrals, a financial penalty. Doctors also may be wary of becoming entangled in a medical malpractice case or causing a colleague to face legal consequences. The bottom line, too often doctors aren't learning from errors, nor are patients getting the information they need to receive proper treatment or compensation when the outcome is harmful. In this Insider Exclusive Network TV special, America's Medical Malpractice Crisis, What You Need to Know, we visit with Moseley Collins at the Moseley Collins Law Firm as we take you inside today's legal system, examining lawyers' strategies and clients' thoughts, and in vivid detail showing you the often heartbreaking stories of these clients, dramatically demonstrating what motivates Moseley to fight for his client's cause. These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few insurance companies, doctors, nurses, or hospitals ever do the right thing. And you need experienced and passionate trial lawyers who wage a battle with their financial resources to get their clients justice. Here's just a few of the stories of many victims of medical malpractice that the Insider Exclusive Network TV shows have featured on Network TV.
When the doctors gave me the choice and the options on the table, either to save her life or to let her pass and peacefully without no pain, it was a small chance that she might live after surgery. But I chose life because I think that anybody deserves a fighting chance. So I decided, my wife and I decided to go ahead with the surgery and give her the chance to fight herself. My daughter Malia is special because she has a positive outlook on life in general, on how well she can accomplish things, how she's not different in any other way from anybody else besides the fact that her legs are metal. When I realized that this could have been possibly avoided by doctors seeing my daughter sooner, of course I was very angry. But I was also focusing on my daughter's condition at the present time. But it also made me think a lot about myself if I would have, demanded her to get attention sooner. I mean, there shouldn't be these things where we have to look back on it now and say, I wish I could have done this different. I wish I would have done this. Well, my daughter doesn't get that choice anymore. She has to live with this for the rest of her life. So hopefully this would be a learning experience for the doctors. That's why I would forgive them and tell them that, Amy, just get better at what you do or pay more attention.
She was a tremendous life, unbelievable energy. She threw parties and she had people over, and she always made dinners for anybody who was sick, and she got involved in every campfire girl, Boy Scout.
She was very capable, smart, giving, dedicated to her children, dedicated to me.
And I kept saying, Mom, what's wrong? What hurts? And she says, my abdomen. And she was miserable. And we said, well, please call a doctor. She needs to be examined. We asked him 3 times.
The nurse said they'd call the doctors. The doctors were aware of the problem, but the unfortunate part about it is the doctors never showed up.
And that's when I reached down and hugged her and I said, we're here. And she opened her eyes.
When the doctors told me that I had to make a decision for my husband's amputations to survive or just let him go, that was very difficult for me. I had to think about it and pray about it and talk with my family. It was a hard decision and life-changing.
My wife has been an angel. She's stuck by me. She's done everything for me. My mom, my sisters, my brothers, my kids. Without them, I wouldn't have made it.
Dr. William J. Irwin failed to comply with the appropriate standard of care for an OB/GYN in the year 2007. And as a result, Rebecca Gatti, a newborn baby, suffered severe brain damage which is lifelong and irreversible. Those brutally frank words were how the Louisiana Medical Review Board explained to Ryan and Susan Gatti, the parents of their new baby girl Rebecca, why Rebecca had suffered irreversible brain damage due to the incompetence of Dr. Irwin, and now will require round-the-clock care for the rest of her life with no chance whatsoever for improvement.
Well, on the day that I gave birth to the boys, I was very scared. You know, it's first time you're getting all ready to your life to change. In the delivery room, they would monitor me and they had all this equipment on me, and then all of a sudden, when he pushed down on my stomach, when the placenta blew away from the uterus, I let out this really loud scream, and it was very painful. And then I just looked at my sister and I knew something was really wrong. I first realized something was wrong with Hunter. Well, he was in the NICU for a week, 8 days. And when he got released, they had told me that Hunter was going to have learning disabilities and he might be dyslexic, but they never mentioned that he may have cerebral palsy. If I had a chance to talk to the doctor today or directly to him, I would say, how dare you? How dare you take away the life that I was supposed to have? And how dare you do this to Joshua?
What I miss most about my mom are the holidays. The house was transformed. My biggest challenge with my mom gone is trying to step in her footsteps. Doctors who are not qualified to perform certain procedures, their license should be revoked. Dr. Jacobowitz, I don't have words. I don't have the words to express what your actions has done, the pain and the suffering that it has caused that can never be reversed.
These are just a few of the real medical malpractice victims who have dealt with our legal system victimized by bad doctors. This is why we all need to protect a legal system that is designed to protect us. and not one that protects incompetent and negligent doctors, nurses, hospitals, and their insurance companies over the common everyday American. Moseley Collins, our featured lawyer, has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Sacramento and California. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people injured and killed by negligent and incompetent doctors, hospitals, and nurses. Moseley's passion is problem solving. He approaches each case as a scientist trying to solve a puzzle. He's seen many patients suffer needless injury, and because of that, he is driven to help people who have been harmed by incompetent and negligent doctors. Moseley's goals: to get justice and fairness for injured people and safeguard victims' rights, and to help guide the hands of justice. As he has so often stated, medical malpractice is also becoming a deserted wasteland for trial lawyers due to expense, caps, manipulation of the system, judicial influence, and the insurance industry's orders to its insured physicians not to participate or cooperate. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sacramento, California. It is my great pleasure to introduce Moseley Collins to the show. Welcome to the show, Moseley.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
I'm appreciating you being here in the first place because we produced two outstanding medical malpractice cases on some really egregious conduct of negligent and incompetent doctors. And the reason we're here today is to talk about, the truths and myths of medical malpractice. But before we go into that, tell our audience a little bit about your firm, because I understand that most of the work that you do is medical malpractice.
About 70% is medical malpractice. The other part is, auto accidents. We specialize in the catastrophic injury case where we can really make a difference.
Yeah. When we talk about medical malpractice, what does that mean to the person who never heard of this before?
It means that the doctor, the nurse, the hospital made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
And as a result, someone has really suffered either permanently or even by dying by death.
Yeah, and let's do a reality check. The reason that you have a practice, the reason that there are lawyers that represent people who have to, unfortunately, sue the hospital, the doctor, the nurse, whatever, is because a lot of these healthcare workers, physicians, surgeons, nurses, don't come forward and say, gee, I'm sorry, what can I do to help, right?
That's absolutely right. The first thing they want to do is let's move on, cover it up, which is kind of a human nature thing. I mean, I think most people would do the same thing, but unfortunately, when you leave someone paralyzed or with amputated limbs or even dead, you really need to come forward.
One of the cases that we covered, and we also feature in this show, is the case of the little girl whose dad brought her to the emergency room. Tell our audience what happened.
He brought her to the mom and dad brought the little girl, her name was Malia, to the emergency room, and they waited and they waited and they waited 5.5 hours. 5.5 hours, and still no one called him in. And finally the dad said to the mom, okay, come on with me. Next time that door opens, I'm just going to bust through. And he just busted in there and said, you've got to help us.
Yeah, the little girl's legs and arms were turning blue, weren't they?
She was turning purple.
Purple.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she ended up having her portions of her leg and her arms amputated, right?
Yeah, she lost both her feet, and she lost essentially both her hands.
Yeah.
So how do 3 years old, you have no arms and you have no hands and feet. That's a pretty tough start.
Yeah.
But she's an amazing girl.
How's she doing today?
Oh, she's doing good, and I think she's going to someday run the Veteran Affairs.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, she's smart.
So when we talk about medical malpractice, and we understand what it is, a lot of times people don't know that their loved ones have had some, incompetent or negligent action taken against them by a healthcare worker, right? So what happens is somebody's in surgery, they die as a result of the incompetence or negligence of a doctor or surgeon, whatever. And that doctor or a representative of the hospital comes out to the family and said, gee, I'm sorry. something happened, we did our best. Those are probably the most common terms, right?
I would think so.
How do you doubt that they're telling the truth?
Well, here's the test I use, because people call us, and you know, I was on the alternate list to go to medical school, but I went to law school instead. But if it is a terrible result, and when you look at it, you say, that seems wrong. That's the test I use, and then you have to go to an actual medical expert to find out. But if something happens to you or your loved one, and you say, that's a terrible result, and that really seems wrong, and if you're a person who's not a lawyer, you need to call a lawyer, in my view.
The medical industry and the insurance industry has ganged up against trial lawyers, right? Because they've spread these myths, and I want to talk about them, that a lot of lawyers file frivolous lawsuits so that they can get jackpot justice. What's wrong with that statement?
Well, first let me say this. People are shocked to know what is the number 3 cause of death in America. You know, so 1 is heart disease, 2 is cancer. What is 3? Is it Parkinson's disease? Is it diabetes? Is it one of those other diseases? No, it's medical error. Number 3 on the list of why people die is doctor mistakes. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's like 100 jumbo jets crashed in a single year. What would our country do if 100 jumbo jets crashed in a single year? I mean, they'd shut down the flights until someone could figure out how come so many people are dying. But that's what happens with doctors.
In this state, we're in California, we have, and explain for our audience, 2 types of compensation. One is non-economic, which is pain and suffering, and another one is economic loss. In some states, including ours, there are caps. Caps mean there are ceilings as to how much, if a doctor has committed an error, right, and it's his fault your loved one died, there is a cap on how much you can receive in this state on pain and suffering. What is that?
It's $250,000.
Okay, and why is that capped out at $250,000?
And I should point out, that's the lowest cap in the United States. And there's many states that have no cap. But the doctors came to Sacramento, where they make the laws in California, and they said, hey, we want a cap on this, so that if they kill your 67-year-old dad, the most they will be required to pay. If a jury gave you $5 million for the death of your father, the judge would have to take a pen, cross out $5 million, and write $250,000, because that's something the doctors achieved politically in this state.
Well, not only the doctors, but wouldn't you agree it's the insurance companies primarily that have been behind the doctors that said, look, we need to reduce some of these lawsuits, you know, the cost of the lawsuits for your errors?
Well, I'm sure the insurance companies are funding a lot of it, but the doctors have the California Medical Association, which is a very powerful lobby, makes big donations to the people who are in Sacramento. And so they have this cap on it, and the argument is, if we don't have the cap, if we just let the juries decide, they'll be too high and the doctors will leave. But the problem with that argument is, in states where there is no cap, the doctors have not left. I mean, the doctors, and there are many good doctors. There are many good doctors, and I have good doctors work on me. But the doctors are the highest paid professional in America. So are we really worried about protecting their income? Of the highest paid people in America.
And what you brought up an example of a 67-year-old man that died, okay, and the cap is $250,000 for non-economic pain and suffering compensation. I think a very important aspect to bring up is the fact that if you don't have economic value, let's say you're unemployed, you don't have a job.
Or you're retired.
You're retired. You don't have income, okay? If a doctor has made a mistake, and I'm going to agree with you that most doctors are good. Most doctors are competent. In fact, I'll give you a statistic about, I think it's something like 3%, 30% of all the medical malpractice errors are caused by 3% of the doctors, okay? And we'll get to that in a minute, you know, about those 3%. But if you don't have any economic value, income, you're retired, you're a student, whatever, unemployed, then because the cap is $250,000, is the most you could get. A lot of victims can't find a lawyer to take their case. Why not?
I will tell you, there are dozens of people who call me every year.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I can't take your case because it's too expensive. To litigate a medical malpractice case, you can spend up to $150,000 hiring other experts to come in and testify for you, because you have to hire doctors to testify against other doctors. And doctors are very expensive. They don't really enjoy that so much unless you pay them a lot. So they're willing to, but it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it almost doesn't make, you almost can't afford to do that $250,000 case, which sounds shocking. But you know, you hire a doctor to be an expert for you, and maybe he charges you $20,000 or $30,000.
Yeah.
And so the problem is you have to have economic damages to support the case, usually. And you mentioned one, which is income. If you had a job and you no longer can do that job, that's an economic damage. But also what we find is some of the people we represent require attendant care, nursing care for the rest of their life.
Right.
And that's a big economic damage.
Yeah.
So if it takes $6 million to take care of someone who's now brain damaged by a doctor's error, that's a number you can put up on the blackboard.
Doctors have licenses and they're regulated by state medical boards.
They are.
Would you say that the state medical boards properly discipline bad, incompetent, negligent doctors?
They don't seem to.
And why is that?
Well, they are probably underfunded and overworked.
Yeah. In other words, there's laws on the books, but no money to back it up.
There can be. We had one case where the medical board found against the doctor, but then once the medical board finds against them, the attorney general has to prosecute them, and the attorney general declined. So the CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, is better than the medical board on holding people responsible.
Right. If you think something has been done wrong at a hospital by a doctor, nurse, whatever, okay, what do you do as a victim of a medical malpractice case? What's the first thing you should do? And before you say call a lawyer, a lot of people don't like calling lawyers.
Sure.
A lot of people try to get the records themselves. What's the problem in getting those records of their wife, of their son, of their daughter, of their father, whatever?
I actually believe it's a good idea to get the records yourself.
Yeah, but it's hard to get them, aren't they?
No, not usually. You just have to ask for it, and usually you'll get the records.
Really?
Yeah. And the next thing you can do is you can file a complaint with in California with the California Department of Public Health.
Yes.
And that's a great thing to do. And they'll come out and investigate it if it's a hospital-caused problem.
Yeah.
So those are two things you can do. And you can also file a complaint with the medical board. Whether they act on it or not, if a bad doctor gets 3, 4, 5, 10 complaints, it'll make a difference.
Let's say you're, able by yourself to determine that there's something funny going on in the records, okay? And you contact the hospital because let's say you're an advocate for your loved one, right? What do they do, if anything? Do they only act if you sue them?
No, there usually is someone at the hospital who will investigate things and might write you a letter. I mean, it's not going to help you pay for the cost of taking care of your loved one, but it might. They sometimes will tell you, yeah, we made a mistake. Sometimes they will.
Coming to an attorney like yourself, who has a lot of experience, and the hospitals around here know you, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, is very helpful, I think, because they know you're not going to take on a case unless you believe in it, and there's pretty good evidence to support what you're claiming, right?
That's true, but every case is hard fought.
Yeah.
They're all hard fought.
They are.
Yeah, because one problem in California is the doctor has to give consent to the settlement, and sometimes doctors don't want to do that because it goes on their record.
Do many of medical malpractice verdicts, do they get appealed?
Yes, I don't know the number, but I assume that's so because it's a pretty complicated trial.
Right. If a doctor is found negligent or, incompetent in the way they handled, a patient, what happens to them?
Well, their insurance company pays the money.
Yes.
And that gets reported to the medical board.
Yes.
And then what goes on after that, I am not sure because it's a private internal thing handled by the medical board. But I would assume that if you got sued enough times and enough verdicts against you that eventually it may cost you your license.
Yeah. Well, what I found and I've done medical malpractice cases all over the United States where they come to the doctor and they say, it might be a good idea if you move on to another state. So if you turn in your license, no, seriously, you turn in your license, when you go apply for another license in another state, you can answer that question, did you ever have any disciplinary action against you? And the answer will be yes. I mean, no, which allows them to practice in that state too. I've seen that time and time. What message do you have to the public at large about what should they do if they suspect something's gone wrong with the medical care that their loved one or that they have received?
Well, I think it's important to know that the medical malpractice cases are actually good for our society.
Yeah.
Can I tell you about that?
Please.
It's good for America, it's good for our state, and there's 3 reasons that medical malpractice cases are good for us. Number 1, it gives people that are terribly hurt by careless doctors or hospitals a hope of justice.
Yes.
They don't feel, that you're going to sit home, maybe you're paralyzed from the waist down now because of a doctor's error. It gives you hope that there could be justice. Hope is very valuable as opposed to feeling hopeless, that no one's ever going to help you, no one's ever going to admit they did wrong. So the first good reason for the medical malpractice case is it gives you hope. The second good reason is it forces if you win the case, it forces the people that hurt you to pay for what you need.
Right.
So why should Medicare pay?
Which is the general taxpayer.
Why should the taxpayer pay for damage that a doctor did?
Yes.
It forces the doctor or his insurance company to pay for taking care of the person now.
Forces the person who's responsible for the injury to pay.
Exactly. And isn't that justice?
Yeah, what's the third reason?
And the third reason is it will force them to look at what they did and to say, guys, come in. Listen, we can't let this happen again. We can't let this happen to the next little girl.
Yeah.
We can't let this happen to the next man, woman. We've got to do better. Guys, you see what happened here? Don't ever let this happen again. That's valuable. That makes our society safer.
Trial lawyers actually make a positive change in the way the community is treated by the medical staff.
Without trial lawyers, there would not be 3-point safety harnesses. You'd have a lap belt maybe, but you wouldn't have any belt here. The steering wheel wouldn't collapse. The children's pajamas would catch fire. They wouldn't be flame resistant. There's so many things that are better because we're holding people responsible. Do you really think these corporations are going to change out of the goodness of their heart? They change because they say, we don't want to pay that again.
Right.
That's too expensive. Let's fix it. Let's not put the gas tank where it explodes and burns people horribly to death.
Well, I want to thank you very much for sharing on this show. And I also want to say that because of the record that I know that you have given to people who have come to you with, legitimate and serious medical malpractice cases, I highly recommend you.
Thank you so much. It's great seeing you again. I look forward to doing more programs with you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.